Welcome to Grow Virtually, an online horticultural educational program presented by the Master Gardener Volunteers of Cobb County. Under the guidance of the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service, we grow gardeners.
Hi, my name is Cary Bradley. I'm a Cobb County Master Gardener Extension volunteer, and I'm going to talk with you about raised bed vegetable gardening. As an introduction to our topic, I'm here at Hyde Farm Park in East Cobb, where we have a community garden with 50 raised beds that are rented out to local residents. This provides us with a great opportunity to look at some examples of how raised beds are used, what some of the benefits are, and why they might be a good solution for your vegetable garden. If you've decided you'd like to try your hand at vegetable gardening, there are plenty of ways you can go about it. But I think the three most common ways are the following. Number one, you can find a plot of land, prepare the soil, and plant your garden directly in the ground. Number two, you can buy some large pots or other containers, fill them with potting soil, and plant a container garden on a sunny patio or deck. Number three is what we're talking about today, and that's to build a raised bed. A raised bed is actually a type of container garden that just happens to be built low to the ground. Raised beds are a great option for a project like a community garden or a school where you have a lot of foot traffic, because it's clearly visible where you can walk and where you can't walk. In fact, one of the greatest benefits of a raised bed is that you don't have to step in the soil, eliminating one of the major reasons for soil compaction. In fact, if you design your bed correctly, you can reach the entire surface of the bed from outside the bed on one side or the other. In your raised bed, you'll have complete control over the soil that goes into the bed, allowing you to create the optimal conditions for your plants to grow. Because you're not walking on the bed, and you won't have compacted soil, the soil should be very easy to work with. Most of your work can be done with small hand tools. As a gardener, I find myself bending over a lot, and it's a lot easier to me to bend over this far to work with a plant than it would be to bend over to work with a plant that's planted directly in the ground. If you have more serious mobility issues, you can always do things like we've done here, where we've built some higher beds for accessibility, or you can build or get a bed that is actually built on legs. So if the gardening is done at tabletop height, you could do it standing up or even sitting in a wheelchair. A raised bed garden also lends itself very easily toward various types of structures that can be used to protect your plants from frost or pests, or to help you maximize the space that you have in your garden by growing vertically. Here at Hyde Farm, we have lots of different things people have built, including things like this trellis that's tied together with zip ties, this hoop house. We have some tomato cages that people have purchased, stakes that are also good for tomatoes, and finally a trellis where you can grow vertically and help to maximize the amount of produce you get from your small space. Here at Hyde Farm, you'll see all kinds of things that people have built using their creativity, from the very simple to the extravagant. So that's a brief look at some of the ways that we use raised bed gardens, and an example of some of the features which will help you as we go forward with the remainder of this presentation. Maybe you're a new gardener. Maybe you've already got a raised bed or two. Maybe you have a plot at a community garden. Whatever your situation, I think in the presentation ahead, you'll find something that'll help you be a better gardener. Hello everyone, I am Cary Bradley, and I am your presenter tonight for the Raised Bed Vegetable Gardening presentation. I'm glad that you've been able to join us. Hyde Farm, where that video was produced, has been, we've had a community garden for about 6 years, and during that time, it's been my privilege to work with a lot of gardeners, mostly new gardeners, some that have a couple years of experience. And tonight, I'd like to share with you from my experience from observing other gardeners with 1 or more years of experience or 0 years of experience, and most importantly, from some of the experts at the University of Georgia, some ways that you can be an effective and successful raised bed vegetable gardener. Presentation that we'll be giving you tonight has the following subject areas. First, we're going to start with how you start a raised bed garden. And I'm going to assume that if you're watching this presentation, you either already have a raised bed or you're considering starting a raised bed. Whatever your situation, even if you have a raised bed now, you'll want to hear what we say in starting the raised bed, because there may be some things in there that will help you improve the situation that you have now. After that, then we're going to talk a little bit about what you can expect from your garden, and what I've boiled down to what I hope is a very succinct list of the keys to gardening success to help you have the best experience with your raised bed garden. So let's talk briefly about getting started with a raised bed. When you set up a new bed, you'll first have to select a location. And then for the bed itself, you have a couple of options. You can build it yourself. There are kits available for sale, or you can hire a professional like a landscaper who'll be more than happy to build something like this for you if you pay them. So we're going to talk a little bit about the do-it-yourself style of beds. We'll talk about how you design them, what kind of materials you can use, and just a couple of cautions about what you want to take into account when you build your bed. So as with a lot of things about raised bed gardening, the principles that we follow apply to a lot of different types of gardens, not just raised beds. The first one being, when I select a location, I want to get something that has full sun. And that means at least 8 to 10 hours of sunlight a day during the summertime. And I include this first on this list because you'd be surprised how many people discover too late that this is what they should have done. Now, a raised bed, by its nature being above the ground, will give you pretty good drainage most of the time, but you will want to, in general, consider the drainage of the site so that you're not building in a gully where you might end up with puddles that you have to walk through. You'll want to have access to water for irrigation, and you want it to be convenient and accessible. So ideally, if it's right outside your back door, that's very convenient to you. If you have a community garden like we have, you may have to drive a mile or two to get to your garden. When you're designing the raised bed itself, we talked in the video about being able to reach the entire bed from outside the frame. So you want the width to be a maximum of probably 4 feet. If, as in this illustration, you have a larger area and you want to include multiple raised beds, you want to keep in mind that an individual bed probably shouldn't be any longer than about 8 to 12 feet, because you'll need to walk around them to get to the other side of the bed. Here is a demonstration of some of the types of materials. I don't have any hard data on this, but my observation is that most raised beds are made out of some kind of wood. You can build a raised bed with fairly rudimentary carpentry skills, some hammers or screws and nails. You can get angle brackets, various types of things to hold the wood together. Some people, in an effort to reduce the cost, will use something like some cinder blocks or concrete blocks, which make a perfectly good raised bed, and they're certainly less expensive than wood and last a long time. A trend that's become more frequent over the last few years is people are starting to use galvanized steel panels to build raised beds, as you see in this illustration. Now, the one thing about the galvanized steel panels is that dirt is heavy and they're not quite as rigid as wood. So in this picture, you'll see that you have a wooden frame to help reinforce the galvanized steel panel, and you can also purchase kits where the forms are made for you, and some of these are modular, so you can build them in different shapes and sizes to fit your needs. Now, however you decide to build your bed, one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're using leftover construction materials or something, some materials you already have, is you don't want to use any kind of materials that may have some sort of preservative or finish that might leach toxic chemicals into your soil. So with that caution, you've got all kinds of options that you can find to build your raised bed. And in fact, in the resources that we have at the end of this presentation, you'll find an article or two that discuss in detail some of the types of materials that you can use and why you may or may not want to use certain types of materials. Then the most important part is going to be filling the bed, and I put soil in quotation marks here because soil, when it comes to what you're going to put in your raised bed, may have fairly nebulous definitions. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but first, the requirements, the things that you'll have to go through is you'll have to calculate the volume, which is pretty straightforward. Many of your materials will be sold by the cubic foot or the cubic yard, and a little bit of simple math will tell you how much you need. For example, at the Hyde Farm, our 4x8 beds will hold about 1 cubic yard of material. Now you'll want to add a variety of ingredients to get the soil characteristics that we're going to talk about, and you'll be able to find online what people actually call recipes of things that are combinations of components that they use to fill their raised beds, and you'll see some of the common components that are here, and there are many others that can be used. So here's an example of some recipes for filling a raised bed, and I just picked a couple here. You can find tons of these things, but I just wanted to show you a couple of examples. You'll see that they have some things in common. The first one is actually one that's been around for many years. It's considered to be a soilless combination, or soilless mix, because it doesn't have any actual soil in it. It's a 1/3 compost, 1/3 vermiculite, and 1/3 peat moss, or coconut coir is becoming more common than peat moss, as peat moss is not really a sustainable material or a renewable resource. Some other experts will give you recipes like the ones that you see below that: 50% topsoil, 30% compost, and so on. The important thing to notice here is that all of these different components are important. So you'll find, if you buy in the store, you can find ready-made, what they call raised bed soil. You can find other types of soils. You want to pay attention to the ingredients to make sure that you have a good mix of the types of materials that will give us the characteristics that you want, which we'll talk about in a second. So, for example, if you see something that says it's topsoil, you might want to look at what the ingredients are, because it might not be topsoil. If someone recommends that you fill your bed with a product that's 100% or close to 100% compost, you might want to take a second look at that and add in some of these other ingredients so that you can get a more optimal mix of materials for your bed. There really is no single proven best exact recipe. One of the resources that you'll receive at the end is an old video with Walter Reeves in it, where he actually goes through the process of filling a raised bed and showing you the materials that he's putting in. And you'll see that they're not measured exactly. It's not like baking a cake. If you put in a little more of this or a little bit less of that, you're not going to ruin the cake. What you want to end up with are the characteristics that we have here. You're going to want organic material. And the organic material is also, when you use compost, you're going to get the microorganisms that actually turn those organic materials into usable nutrients for your plants. You're going to want to have materials in there that will hold water and nutrients. And at the same time, you're going to want to have something, call it roughage, but something that'll keep the soil flaky and crumbly for aeration, because those microorganisms are going to need oxygen as well as water. The pH level of your soil is going to be very important. So some of the materials that you put in will affect the pH level. And then, of course, you want to have the nutrients from, as you find in fertilizer, some of the micronutrients and minerals and the crumbly soil structure to give your plants the basis from which to grow. Now, before we talk about the exact techniques that you're going to use, you're going to want to use in your garden, whether you actually use them or not is up to you. I'm going to talk for a minute about what to expect from your garden. And this is from when I work with new gardeners. One of the things that they're a little bit surprised about is it really does require a fair amount of time and physical labor. We get a lot of visitors at Hyde Farm, and as they walk around the garden, they'll always see one or two gardens that really stand out as looking very productive and neat and green, and always have fruit on the vines. And they ask me, what is this person's secret? It's such a great garden that they have. And my answer is always the same, and that is they show up, they put in the time. And now, while there are things that you can choose to spend your time on, there is no substitute for spending time at the garden. Another thing that I want to make sure that you understand, so you don't have incorrect expectations, is that you're probably not going to save money on groceries by growing your own vegetables. This is a topic that a lot of times comes up with our visitors to the garden who have their own gardens. And it comes up in a way that they don't really want to mention it, but it will come up because they think it's just them. But the fact is, you have a hard time competing with the efficiency and the economies of scale of commercial growers that put food in the grocery stores. So you probably won't save money, but there are things that you will get out of your garden, such as you'll get fresher vegetables, probably healthier vegetables, more nutritious. You'll get intangible things like spending time in the outdoors is known to have beneficial effects on your physical and your mental health. It can be a great family activity. A lot of people just like to play in the dirt, to grow plants. So you will find lots of ways that you will get satisfaction potentially out of your garden, other than thinking that you're going to save money on your groceries by growing your own vegetables. And it is a hobby. I point this out. It's a hobby that many people enjoy. And if you're new to this and just thinking about beginning a garden, the reason I mention this is because many people enjoy it, but many people don't. One of the things we find at a community garden, and a reason that you may want to start small, is that some people find out that they just don't like it, or they don't have time, or they don't feel like they're good at it. But if you enjoy learning about plants, working with plants, working in the outdoors, it may be a project that you have with your family, you may find that gardening is a highly enjoyable and rewarding hobby for you to have. You can expect to have failures. Not all these failures will be your fault. They may be due to the weather. They may be due to some disease or soil conditions or vermin, something that is to some degree beyond your control. But the idea is that the next year you'll use those failures to become more successful. And finally, gardening is a constant learning experience, a lifelong learning experience, and it involves problem solving. Along with your failures, you're going to have other things that don't work out right, things that happen that are unexpected. And the reasons that those things happen are not always completely evident. And so finding the cause of your problems and solving them requires a little detective work. And it's one of the things that some people really enjoy about gardening. So what I've tried to do is boil down the keys to being successful as especially a raised bed vegetable gardener. A lot of these things pertain to any kind of vegetable garden, but we'll try to concentrate and point out those things that are unique to raised bed gardens. And I made a list of all of these factors and things you want to learn and things you want to do. And I thought, well, this is pretty complicated. So I actually boiled it down to two main keys under which all these other things fall, that if you follow these keys, you should be a successful vegetable gardener. The first key, I think, is to make a plan. Now, this is one where I get pushback. I mentioned this idea of making a plan to some of our people who've had a garden for a year or two, and they say, I don't really need a plan. I can do this. And certainly, you can grow a garden without having a plan. You can go, when you get around to it, you can go to the garden center sometime in the spring, see what they have left, and pick up a bunch of stuff and throw it in the bed, and something is going to grow, and you're going to be okay. But my goal here is to help you get good at this and to do a better job every year. So you don't have to spend a whole lot of time on a plan, but like most activities that you do, you save a lot of time in the long run by making a plan. This is a simple handwritten plan for a small bed that was put together by a master gardener that taught a raised bed gardening class a couple of years ago. And you can see that it's just draw it in pencil. I tend to draw a plan like that all the time before I start a garden. The most obvious thing with the garden, with the plan, is you can see what kind of spacing you're going to have, how many plants you're going to need. And as I say that, I will tell you that one of the common things I see among new gardeners is they try to plant the equivalent of a 20-acre farm in a 4x8 bed. We want to grow everything. So we have a tendency to plant too much, which we'll deal with in a bit. And we also have a great difficulty, especially in the early years, picturing what that garden is going to look like once those little tiny plants grow up into sometimes big monsters. So one of the things that you want to do that making a plan will help you with is to maximize your space. You're going to have, we talked in the video about using trellises and cages and stakes to grow your garden vertically, so that things like vines, where you have cucumbers or squash, can be grown upward. And in doing that, you're going to want to arrange plants so that the taller plants and the plants on supports don't shade the sunlight from the other plants. So you're going to want to help maximize that. And this is the time when you first plan your garden that you want to determine what kind of support you're going to put in and what there's going to be. And if you don't do that, you run the risk of having something like you put in one of the 3-foot devices that the garden centers laughingly call a tomato cage, and you end up finding out that your tomatoes are 8 feet tall. So you deal with a problem like that. And then what you do, lacking any other plan, you do something like this person did, where you get some spare wood, some sheets, some ropes, and you try to hammer and tie something together to hold the thing up. So again, another good reason that you want to plan ahead with your garden. Another thing you can do by planting is extending the growing season. We have a relatively long growing season here in Georgia, but what I mean by extending is, everybody knows that you can plant some crops in the springtime and you can plant some crops in the fall. But you can actually, if you choose the right plants at the right times, you can plant multiple crops in succession and move from one crop to the next and have 2 or possibly 3 crops and 3 harvests of during the summer growing season. Another reason for staggered types of planting would be that you'll find out that very often you get big masses of the same thing all at the same time. So for example, if I decide that I want to grow 20 heads of lettuce in my garden, I could plant them and have 20 heads of lettuce all get ripe, mature at the same time, or I could plant them in a staggered fashion and maybe harvest 2 heads of lettuce this week, 2 more heads the next week, and so on. One of the things you also want to take into consideration for the health of your plants is crop rotation. I think most people know that it's not a good idea for the sake of plant nutrition and also for diseases and pests to plant the same crop over and over again in the same location. At the same time, there are plants that you'll find called companion plants that tend to do well together, whether they grow in ways that don't compete with each other, whether they tend to attract harmful insects away from each other, various reasons that certain plants should be planted next to each other. And those are things that you can work out during your planning process. Here's a quick little chart that just shows you some of the families that the plants are in and what you want to keep in mind as you plan your crop rotation, so that each year in given areas of your garden, you rotate the types of crops that you plant, the family of crops in a particular area. And having a plan and keeping notes about what you plant will help you with that. So there you are. Don't make a plan if you think I'm crazy to spend my time doing that, and you'll be able to grow a garden. But if you really want to take the best advantage of the space that you have, making a plan and keeping some notes about what you do will help you in all of these areas. The next main key, I told you there were only 2, is one that may surprise you. Read the instructions. And you say, wait, what? There are instructions? Nobody told me there were instructions for doing this. But yes, there are instructions, and you've seen them. They're in all kinds of places. The vendors that sell you different products from seeds and plants and soil amendments and that, it's to their advantage to give you instructions on how to use their products properly, and they provide various types of instructions to help you with that. You'll find plenty of online videos and websites and blogs where people will give you their opinions. The thing that you want to keep in mind, a couple of things. One is there is no authority for telling you whether this person that you are watching or reading online actually knows what they're talking about. And you'll find some people that are maybe a little questionable in terms of what their expertise is. But you also find, use your judgment. You'll find that there are people who are experts in their field, people who have published books and have TV shows and various types of authority and credentials that will lend credence to what they tell you. Another thing that you want to watch out for is that there are a lot of people who will give you advice, but they don't tell you where they are. So someone who is recording a video in Maine and telling you how to grow things, it's not necessarily going to apply to you in Georgia. So the net of all of this is that you need to keep in mind that not all of the instructions you'll see are correct. and not all of the instructions may be correct for you based on your situation. But there is a solution to this. And I can give you a one-stop shop where you can find pretty much all of the instructions, not only the instructions you need, but also a reference where the people are authorities. The information is specifically tailored to gardening in Georgia, and it's all in one place, and it's not from anyone who's trying to sell you anything, and that is the University of Georgia Extension website. Now, here are three ways that you can get to exactly the same place, and you'll get a fourth because it'll be in the resources that you see at the end of the presentation and that you receive. But if you go to the publications, you'll find tons and tons and tons of information that pertain specifically to our situation and our growing conditions here in the state of Georgia. So here's just a sampling to show you what you'll see. This is there's a whole series of articles on home gardening. Some of these are general gardening things, and not all of them apply to raised beds specifically. But as I've said, there's a lot of information that applies to any kind of garden, whether it's a raised bed or a container or something else. So there are tons of information here. And you can search for the specific things that you're interested. For example, for just about any particular crop that you want to grow, you're going to find detailed information on everything you want to know about growing that thing. Here I've taken the example of tomatoes, which is the most popular plant to grow. And you can only see, I mean, with this screenshot, you can just see the top of the page, but this is a fairly long article where they're going to tell you everything about growing tomatoes, the process of growing, how to take care of them. They're going to suggest certain varieties that might do well in Georgia. And they're going to talk about some of the problems and the pests that you might run into and how to deal with those. One of my most frequently used resources that comes from the UGA Extension is this vegetable planting chart. In the spring and the fall, this chart answers probably 50 to 75% of the questions that I get from gardeners about, well, is it time that I can plant this, or when do I plant lettuce, or what can I plant at this time of year? So you can see that this is just again a sample. This is a couple pages long for virtually every vegetable you might want to grow in your garden. You can see information like the number of days from planting to maturity, so you can help plant, for example, your succession planting. You get some cultivars, which are cultivated varieties. Those are some of the varieties that do well in Georgia, so you have a good starting point. Dates when you can plant them in the spring and fall. Some, as you see, can only be planted in the spring, or some will only be relevant in the fall. And then some of the other information that you'll have to sort of interpret for the raised bed. You're not going to plant seeds by the 100-foot row, and you're not going to plant your plants in rows that you can. You might plant them in straight lines, but you're not going to plant them in rows that you can walk between. So the most important thing about space planting is the amount of space between plants, not the size rows you need, because you won't be walking among your plants. So things that you're going to find when you read the instructions include some of the following things. Number one, you're going to learn that you should always mulch your garden. These are some examples: some wheat straw, some leaves, some bark. You can use pine straw. Some people use grass clippings, which you need to be careful. If your grass is treated with chemicals, you don't want to use that. Wood chips, all kinds of things that you can use. Mulch will help moderate changes in soil temperature, so that, for example, in the baking sun in the summertime, your soil and the roots that are close to the surface don't get baked by the heat. They'll help conserve water, and they do serve to keep weeds under control at least a little bit. Some of the instructions that you're going to read deal with thinning and pruning plants. Some of the plants, like tomatoes, pruning is a very important part of taking care of the plants under any conditions. But because we tend to plant too much, a lot of times, you'll find that one of the ways that you can keep sunlight and airflow, which are very important going to your plants, is to come along later in the season and prune some of the branches that are keeping those things from happening. We hate to cut off branches. We think we're cutting back on our production, but a lot of times pruning will help give you better vegetables, maybe a couple fewer, but better quality and bigger vegetables when the plants don't have as many leaves to try to feed. Another thing with thinning is you get situations like this where you plant plenty of seeds. And in this case, someone has planted a couple of rows of lettuce, very thick seeding. If you read the package, you'll see that these seeds these plants are probably supposed to be planted. They're thinned to maybe 6 or 8 inches apart. So if you want to grow full heads of lettuce, some pretty serious thinning is going to have to take place. I guess the good news here is you can eat the baby lettuce leaves. So as you thin these, you're not just throwing them away. You can use those baby leaves. And also note that varieties matter. We talked about some of the cultivars that the UGA Extension recommends that you plant that are good in Georgia. But you'll want to keep track of what you plant, because you're going to find that different varieties may do better in your garden than others. You're also going to find that there are ones that you like better. I've had a case where I shared some kale seeds. I actually found two people who were willing to plant and eat kale. So I shared some seeds with them, and they both planted them. They both came back to me a month or so later after they'd grown them. And the one lady said, "Thank you for sharing those seeds with me. That is the greatest kale. That is the most delicious kale I have ever eaten." And the other ones came back a day later and said to me, "You know, that kale that you gave me, I've never tasted anything so horrible. They ought to take that stuff off the market." So keep track of what you plant, because the variety is going to make a difference in your experience and your satisfaction and enjoyment. The other reason that varieties matter is I'll get questions from gardeners, and I'll use peppers as an example. You can use any type of plant, and we get this question. They'll come to me and they'll say, "Hey, are these peppers supposed to look like this?" And my first question, obviously, is what kind of peppers are they? And if their answer is, "I don't know," then it's going to be pretty difficult to answer their questions. And if there is a problem, to help them solve that problem. So varieties matter. You're also going to learn, and this varies from plant to plant, when and how to harvest the plants. People have a tendency to leave a lot of vegetables on the vine too long, maybe thinking that bigger is better. And I know people sometimes express a fear that I don't want to harvest things too early. And so it's going to be different, as I say, for each plant. But one of the things to keep in mind, especially where you have plants where the edible parts are produced from blossoms, where they grow into some sort of a fruiting plant, that when you harvest them early, a lot of times they're better tasting and more tender and sweeter when they're young. And they also, as you harvest them, it encourages the plant to produce more. Now, storage I'm talking about here really means, very often that you'll find, for example, that I find myself all at once with enough jalapeno peppers that I could consider opening a Mexican restaurant, and I give them away to all my neighbors and family and everyone that I can. I still have a bunch left over, so you want to know, to keep those from going to waste and make the best use of what you grow, you want to know how to preserve those, whether you freeze them, dehydrate them, pickle them, can them. All that information you can find by reading things on the UGA website and some of the other sources that you'll find online. one important thing we could do an entire presentation about this is fertilization and nutrient management. Now, a lot of people want to grow organically, so you need to make sure that you know what kind of fertilizer you're using. And in any case, you always start with a soil test. UGA Extension has a soil test, and again, one of the resources that we'll give you at the end of this presentation is a very good video showing you exactly how to take a soil sample. And you'll get a report back like the one that's shown on your screen that'll show you what types of nutrients are needed and what type of soil to use. One of the things to keep in mind, virtually everybody wants to grow organically, that you'll see is probably too small for you to see, but in this example, they're recommending a certain number of pounds of 15-0-15 fertilizer, which is a traditional synthetic fertilizer. You're not going to find an organic fertilizer in that formulation. They have much lower concentrations percentage-wise of nutrients, and they also, because of the way that they work, they take longer to take effect. So you may want to keep in mind that the instructions you get, again, an example of something that you want to take, use your judgment with the instructions that you get, is how to relate your organic fertilizer needs and usage to what they give you in these recommendations. They'll also give you pH levels, which again is one of the most important factors in determining how well your plants can absorb and use the nutrients from the fertilizer that you give them. You're going to want to properly irrigate your vegetable garden. One of the things that I find people do very often is they water too much. So you don't need to water every day. You should water infrequently, well, as infrequently as you can in order to keep it a little moist. But water when your plants get dry, and water deeply. You can also set up a more automatic system of watering, like the one on the left here, which is a drip irrigation system, which will slowly release water at the soil level and not get water on the leaves, which can lead to disease. And the one on the right is another type of product that you can get commercially, which it's not really drip irrigation. This plastic piping has little holes in it that you hook your hose up to it, and it turns into little miniature water fountains that will water your garden evenly. And finally, you're going to want to deal with pests and diseases. And on the UGA website, you're going to find a very frequently used methodology called integrated pest management. And basically, integrated pest management is aimed at helping you properly identify, perhaps prevent, and then with the minimum environmental impact that you can, disrupt the life cycle of those pests so that you can try to keep them under control. And this is an ongoing process that you can read more about and that you'll want to learn about. So there you are. The second key is to read the instructions, and reading the instructions will gain you all of these benefits in terms of learning these types of methods and techniques and concepts that will help you be a better vegetable gardener. So what we've covered in this review is, or in this session rather, is we've talked about a little bit about installing raised beds, which is important to you if you're new or if you're up to replacing a raised bed that maybe has outlived its useful life. We talked about the growing media that you put in, which even if you're not a new raised bed gardener, you may find that discussion will help you solve some problems by adding some amendments that you may not have had when you first started the garden. We talked a little bit about what to expect for a home garden, so that if you so that you have a way of determining whether you're a successful gardener or not. And we talked about I tried to boil it down to two main areas of the keys to enjoying your garden and to becoming a better gardener every year by making plans and following them, and adjusting your plans and continuous learning, and then reading the instructions and following the instructions that you can find all over the place, and especially through the UGA Extension Service, as to how to best choose, plant, care for, grow, and harvest and enjoy your vegetables. Here are a couple of resources. The Cobb County Extension Office has a Master Gardener help desk that you can call at any time, not just for vegetables, by the way, any type of ornamentals, perennials, trees, turf grass, any types of home horticultural issues that you have, you can call there. You can send emails, or you can even, if you have a sample of a plant, you can bring it into the office and discuss it with someone there. So here is the aforementioned long list of references, page 1. Again, you don't have to worry about doing a screenshot or writing these down. We'll send you a copy of all of these by email for everyone who registered for this webinar. But these are all, first of all, the entire presentation was either based on or referenced or backed up by information that's on these references. And you'll find, in addition to these, you'll find many other references on the UGA Extension Publications website that are going to help make you a better gardener.
We hope that you will find our information informative and helpful. Thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.